Leanne mentioned that I'm an oncology nurse. I'm a chef. You can decide if you think I'm a musician. But that makes me a chef-nursian. So I'd like to start with a high-fiber, low-fat song. It was written in the early 90s. And because of that, a lot of the nutritional advice in this song has changed, as you know how it's changing every day, you know. But it's still funny, and we're still going to have fun with this. All right, here we go. Honey, brew up some coffee. I got a new treat for you. It's gonna make our loving last. Our hearts will beat like new. It's oat bran muffins. Oat bran muffins. I'll put them in the oven for lifelong loving. Oat bran muffins. Well, I used to be a ham and cheese omelet girl with a bagel and cream cheese too. But if you want to have fun past 31, 41, 51, 61, 71, 81, 81, 91, then you gotta make a change or two. So toss out that tub of butter, T-bone steak and eggs, whip up the bran and the egg beaters. Honey, don't make me beg. Give me those oat bran muffins. Oat bran muffins. I'll put them in the oven for lifelong loving. Oat bran muffins. Now, people, I know that a muffin alone won't keep that doctor away. So here's my solution. Let's join that revolution, and we'll start a brand new day. We'll start with oat bran crunch for breakfast. Then it's oat bran bread at noon. We'll have oat bran tofu meatless loaf and have a bathroom built for two. Give me those oat bran muffins. Oat bran muffins. Oh, now put them in the oven for lifelong loving. Oat bran muffins. Now, ladies and gentlemen, ever since I learned this song, I have become a true believer in oat bran. Say amen. Amen. Let me hear you again. Amen. Yeah, and I believe that if he had used it, Elvis would be alive and with us. He'd be working out on that equipment next door because you know he needs it. But wait a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, Elvis is in the building. Ho, 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 bran muffins, uh-huh. Ho, 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 bran muffins, uh-huh. Ho, 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 bran muffins, uh-huh. Ho, 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 bran muffins. It don't worry me at all, 'cause it lowers my cholesterol. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, Elvis will make his lips curl for food. That's what I heard. But anyway, thank you all. And I like to start with that rather unrefined song to remind you that a lot of the problems with food, it's pretty simple these days. It's gotten too refined, too processed, and we've lost the fiber of life in a way, and a lot of the phytonutrients and all those good things that real food has to offer. So what I'm here about in the next hour or so is to talk to you about nourishment for life. You notice I'm using the word nourishment and not nutrition. So nutrition is sort of the science of the individual elements of food, like proteins, fats, carbohydrates. I don't eat protein, fats, and carbohydrates. I eat food, okay? Real food. And nourishment is more than just about putting nutrients in our bodies. It's the whole piece of eating. It's the preparing. It's the buying the seeds, the garden. All these people here working together to cook. It's your being here together in this beautiful space and sharing time with each other. And we wanted to make sure you had plenty of time to eat and talk with each other instead of listening to me while you ate. So nourishment is really sort of the whole package. And so what I'd hope you'll walk away with this evening are some basic principles of cancer and nourishment, the benefit of health-supportive eating, some principles of healthy food selection, and the steps to delicious. So the very last thing we're going to do a demo, and I'm going to talk to you about how we built the flavor in that quinoa salad. And the principles for building that flavor are the same all over the place. So my 4 guiding principles are, there are no good or bad foods. Food just gives information. Now, what do I mean by that? I use myself as an example. I have a sensitivity to soy. And if I eat it, it gives me some information, some of which is very loud. and other people would know that soy was talking to me. So I choose to take that information of having some abdominal bloating and gas and joint pain and fatigue to tell me soy is not health supportive for me. And so that's the information. But it may be health supportive for someone else. So it's not a good food, it's not a bad food. It just gives information. Also, you can't eat dogma. How many times you had people wagging their finger at you, like the dog wagging its tail, saying, you should eat this or you shouldn't eat that. So it has to be individualized. And what I really love about what's happening out in that garden, it's more than just a garden. The people who are part of that garden, their physician has referred them and it's been prescribed for them what plants they need to be eating for themselves. So it's individualized. So you can't just say everybody fits into one diet. It has to be individualized. Michael Pollan, who's one of my heroes, said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. If you walked away with one thing today, that would be the sentence to circle and take home with you. Eat food, real food, not too much, mostly plants. And then who said, eat your vegetables, right? Hopefully someone's loving person who took care of them said, eat your vegetables. So let's talk a little bit about some cancer and nutrition basics. About 30 to 35% of cancers are related to diet. If you stretch that out and look at lifestyle, about 85% of cancers are related to lifestyle. So there are so many things going on right here that help people learn healthy ways of living, not just eating, but all the other things that can be preventative of cancer and other illnesses, or perhaps can prevent cancer from coming back or slowing it down. Some diets create conditions that increase the risk of getting cancer. We're going to talk about the SAD, Standard American Diet, several times tonight, and which is known to cause inflammation. And inflammation is kind of a common pathway to a lot of different chronic illnesses. There are some foods that we eat that make it harder for us to withstand cancer treatment and its side effects. On the other hand, there are some foods that make it easier for us to go through treatment. So some diets can help us recover from cancer, and some diets can decrease our risk of either getting cancer in the first place or our cancer coming back, and we'll look at some of that. Back in 2000, these were some of the links they were finding between food and cancer, and you'll see several references made it to being overweight, to high-fat diets, alcohol. So those were some of the links. Over time, since 2000, we're finding some other links. Not yet all the research is in, but insulin resistance is linked to several cancers, and we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. Chronic inflammation, certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Xeno means foreign estrogens in the food. So estrogens can come in through even the containers that your food is in. It can come in through pesticides that are what we call foreign estrogens that can be in the water and in the soil. And then ways we prepare food. So I love my food grilled, but if you char it and you eat a lot of charred food, that can make smoke that comes up and create some some chemicals in the food that are not good for you. So I actually teach classes on healthy grilling. But where we have the most evidence, and this is where we can focus a lot of attention, is the strongest link to cancer is obesity. And also alcohol is associated, we know for sure, a lot of cancers of the head and neck area, the esophagus, are linked to, and liver and breast are linked to alcohol consumption. Soy foods actually might protect against prostate cancer in men and breast cancer in women, especially premenopausal women. That being said, there have been lots of studies coming out recently that look at red meat consumption and processed meat, and they're finding higher rates of prostate cancer and increased risk of having advanced cancer. What we don't know, and that because not many people are they're looking at whether or not that red meat came from cows that were raised on corn, genetically modified corn most likely, or cows that ate grass all their lives. So there's a difference, and I want you to understand something. We are what they eat, whether it's the plants or the animals. We are what they eat. So actually, if a cow eats what it's been born and raised to eat, it's grass, and they chew all day long. You ever notice that? And they have a number of stomachs that can take care and extract all the nutrients from that grass. And believe it or not, there are fatty acids in the grass, and there are omega-3 fats that they're getting from the grass, which makes them make an anti-inflammatory fat, omega-3. If it eats corn, that's a pro-inflammatory fat, an omega-6 fat, and they will make this pro-inflammatory fat in their tissues. So we are what they eat. So I wonder if they did that study, and the doctor today said, well, you won't find enough men to put in the study who eat grass-fed beef. But at some point, if we could compare the difference between people who eat grass-fed beef versus corn-fed beef, if there's a difference. Obesity and breast cancer. We have found that women who have a body mass index in the obese range after diagnosis of breast cancer, they have twice the risk of dying from breast cancer than women with a normal body mass index. But don't let that news be discouraging. It doesn't stop there, because actually what you eat can make a difference. So there's been a study of women who have breast cancer, the Women's Intervention Nutrition Study, and they looked at over 2,000 women who were previously treated for breast cancer, and with a low-fat diet, it reduced their risk of the cancer coming back by 25%. So for the sort of disturbing news that we have the good news on the other side, that it's not too late, just like it's not too late for people to stop smoking. It's not too late to start adding healthy lifestyle practices. Also, they looked at people whose cancer went away, like GOK, God only knows why it went away. So they call that spontaneous regression of cancer. And actually, there may be some explanation of why that cancer went away. In 200 cases of this, 87% of the people who had their cancer just go away had made dietary changes. And here were some of the foods they ate. And just kind of take a look at that list, because over and over again in this talk, you're going to see anti-inflammatory foods are similar to that. The foods that don't cause insulin resistance are some of the same foods that they ate. And they avoided processed foods, commercially raised meats, smoked meats and fish, white sugar, table salt, alcoholic beverages. So that's encouraging. There are many things that influence cancer cells. So they live in an environment in your body, okay? And many things influence them. What we're going to focus on tonight are gene instability, insulin resistance, and inflammation. And I'm going to talk to you about some practical pieces of each of that. So we're not talking about Levi genes when I say gene instability. We're talking about GENES. So some genes turn on or stimulate cancer growth. And some genes we know turn off or slow cancer growth. So you have brakes and you have accelerators in your body. You have genes that are like the brakes, and you have genes that are like accelerators. So NF-kappa B, that's what that NF and that K, NF-kappa B is cancer's master switch. And some of the things that can trigger that would be carcinogens. Carcinogens are things like cigarette smoke, for instance, radiation, things like that. Oxidation, viral infections. For instance, people who have a viral infection of the liver, like a hepatitis, are at greater risk for turning on genes and getting cancer. So inflammation can cause these NF-kappa B to be turned on, and stress. So what happens is when NF-kappa B is triggered, it turns on over 400 genes that are involved in tumor growth, tumor survival, tumors creating a blood supply. Everybody knows if you want to get a supply of food, you have to make sure you have good roads and all that kind of stuff. Well, cancers have to do that too. And it also makes it easier for the cancer to invade. But right in your kitchen, you have a kitchen pharmacy with your herbs and spices. So these culinary spices are known to inhibit NF-kappa B. NF-kappa B, the master cancer switch. And we have had a number of these. I know maybe for some too much garlic in the food tonight, but we have had garlic, chili powder, which also has cumin in it, lots of parsley, even the lemonade had rosemary in it, the spread, the lima bean spread. So we've had a lot of these herbs just in your meal tonight. So how does nutrition affect the gene expressing itself? With certain vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients in the food, some keep the cancer DNA strands from unraveling and making copies. So I don't know if you ever saw that double helix of the DNA. So what happens is it unravels for a little while so that these other parts of the system called RNA can come along and make photocopies of the genes so the cell can divide. So what the cell wants to do is make a total copy of itself so it can divide into two, and each side gets a copy of everything. So some of the foods we eat, the vitamins and mineral, can keep the cancer DNA from unzipping itself and being copied, and that's a good thing. We don't want cancer DNA to copy itself and keep proliferating over and over again. So the foods that turn off the cancer-promoting genes, and the cancer-promoting genes are called oncogenes, and there are some foods that turn on cancer-suppressing genes. So what are the top 10 foods to favorably modify gene expression? Well, if you think back to the other list, a lot of the foods that were on the other list for spontaneous regression are on this list. Broccoli is going to show up over and over and over again, and it showed up in 2 places in your meal tonight because we can't overemphasize broccoli and its family of cauliflower, cabbage. We had kale is in the same family. We had kale in your soup tonight, in the chili. Dark leafy greens, garlics, onions, leeks, parsley. We had parsley all over the place. We had red peppers. So lots of things can favorably modify the gene's expression. Now, there's a lot of confusion people have about, they think, well, sugar, cancer is fed by sugar. And it's really not quite so simple, but I'm going to explain to you what you need to know about sugar. And when I say sugar, I'm not talking about like white table sugar. I'm talking about foods that have carbohydrates that have what we call a high glycemic load. That is, it makes your blood sugar go up fast and often. So we're going to talk about those foods. And I'm going to explain a few terms to you, and then we'll talk about, well, what does that mean in real life? How do I make sense of that? Have you heard the term glycemic index? That's kind of like all over the place. So you're supposed to eat low glycemic index foods, right? So what does that mean? Well, it means glycemic index is just sort of this lab measure, a measure in the laboratory of this food would make the blood glucose levels go up this much and this quickly. But what it doesn't tell you is, well, what about how much of that food did somebody eat? What about if they ate it ground up as a flour as opposed to eating it as a whole grain? What about if they cooked that pasta to mush instead of al dente? So glycemic load would take those things into account. So a carrot may actually have a relatively high glycemic index, but it also has what? It has fiber with it, right? And it's going to slow it down because you have to chew it well and your body has to work on it. So if you drank carrot juice, that would have a high glycemic load because your body would absorb the glucose out of that right away. But if you ate carrot with the fiber in it, it's going to slow it down and it won't make your blood sugar spike as much. If you cook your pasta al dente, it will have a lower effect on your blood sugar and then your insulin than if you ate it mush, okay? If you grind up a grain into a flour, you're just making it really easy for the body to absorb the sugars out of that grain, as opposed to if you eat it as a whole grain. So your quinoa salad, for instance, it wasn't ground up in a flour and made into a muffin. It was whole grain quinoa that you were eating. Okay, so how much is a lot or not so much of a glycemic load? So 10 or lower is considered low, 20 or higher is considered high. Please do not memorize these numbers. I'm going to talk to you about some practical applications. So these foods probably wouldn't surprise you. In general, these foods have a moderate to a high glycemic load. But that being said, I spent a lot of money going to culinary school to learn things that I'm teaching you for free. So, all right, so muffins here. I make some muffins that use almond flour in it. Almonds are nut. They don't have carbohydrates in them, so they have no glycemic load. Does that make sense? And I put a little bit of oats in it with all the fiber and the bran. So it has a much lower glycemic load than if I had made that muffin out of even ground up whole wheat flour. So does that make sense? So you can have some of these foods a bit more healthy than what you think. And you might be surprised at what foods that people say, well, you should eat that. You should eat whole wheat bread, right? That's better than eating white refined bread. But these foods can even have a moderate glycemic load. So it doesn't mean you should never eat them. And this is a better choice than to eat refined flour foods, for instance. But consider eating more whole grains. So fruit juice, why would that have a higher glycemic load? Yeah, you're just getting all the sugar extracted and none of the fiber. And then a lot of fat-free foods are, when you eat fat with your meal, it's going to slow things down. And that's good. If you can slow things down, moving through your system, then that will lower the glycemic load. So all those years, we thought fat was bad, right? All fats were bad. So we cut out most of the fats, including the good fats, and we were eating what? How much pasta did you eat in those years? You know, the bottom of the pyramid, the thing you're supposed to eat the most, wasn't it grains, pasta and things like that. So, oh, it's not, I know who can we beat up on for that? So, whatever. So what's the max recommended estimated glycemic load per day? Again, you don't have to memorize it, but I do want you to remember it long enough to get to the next slide. 100 or less per day, kind of distributed evenly across your meals and snacks. So let's look at Coke. We could pick on Pepsi if we wanted, anything that's sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, okay? 4 8-ounce bottles of Coke, which is, some people drink even more than that, right, in a day. What you're really getting is 100 grams of high fructose corn syrup. It's a cheap way to sweeten those beverages. And you're getting a glycemic load of 136. So do you remember slide before? What was the max per day? 100. So now you've blown it. You've blown it. You're going to have to eat air for the rest of, no. Okay. And then the inflammation factor, where you see this negative number, a negative number it means it's inflammatory. And the bigger the negative number, the more inflammatory it is. This is strongly inflammatory. And we're going to talk about what that inflammation means. And let's just talk a little bit about fructose, because people thought, oh, fructose, it's natural. And it became, you know, the natural food stores back in probably the 80s and 90s. Everybody was going for fructose because they thought it was going to be better for you than glucose. And we always love to hear good news about our bad habits. So let's eat fructose because it's natural and it's better for you. But anyway, what is fructose? Well, it's the sugar that's found in corn syrup, honey, and fruit, okay? So it's naturally occurring, but in fruit, you can't eat enough fruit to get near the fructose you get in a soft drink. So what they did was they took some folks and they said, eat this meal and drink a glucose-sweetened drink with it. And then they took the same meal, but they said, now use a fructose-sweetened drink. And what they found is the fructose-sweetened drinks made you release more of a hormone that tells you you're hungry and less of the two hormones that tell you you are full. So do you see how you're getting a double whammy effect that would stimulate you to want to keep eating? And also it raised people's triglycerides, and we all know that that's sort of a precursor to diabetes. The other thing about fructose, and this is especially a problem in people who have some kidney damage, is that a lot of fructose consumption can lead to high blood pressure, dangerous high blood pressure. But if you take away like the high fructose corn syrup in the drinks or whatever, you can bring it back down to normal. So there could be plenty of people around here who they haven't explored why their blood pressure is up and they're on blood pressure medicine, and maybe all they need to do is drink a liter less of their, you know, sweetened Coke a day. So what are we going to drink then? Well, you can drink water for hydration. You can, you know, the big thing now is to like let some lemons and oranges and limes sit in your water, or cucumber water or something like that to make it a little more interesting. And then if you want a treat, you can have a strawberry almond butter smoothie. So a cup of frozen unsweetened strawberries, a glycemic load of 2. That's it. And then it's mildly anti-inflammatory. The almond butter has no glycemic load because it's not a carbohydrate, and it's mildly anti-inflammatory. And then you put some water in there and you've added some hydration. So that's a nice treat, and we use it. I work for Smith Center for Healing in the Arts. We put on week-long retreats and 3-day retreats and 1-day retreats for people with cancer. And at the week-long retreats, they come in the afternoon and they would have a smoothie like this. And by adding the almond butter, we're adding more protein to it, but we're also slowing down the any sugars that there might be. We're slowing down the absorption of those sugars. So what is sugar's connection to cancer? And again, I'm talking about high glycemic load carbohydrates. Cancer cells consume about 10 to 50 times more glucose than normal cells. That's because normal cells, they're not constantly dividing. They come to a point where they're going to, I'm just going to do my day-to-day business. But cancer cells, their job is to replicate and divide and keep making more of themselves. So because they're so busy, they need more energy, and they use glucose. The pancreas, when you eat these sorts of foods, it's going to release more insulin. Well, insulin's job, one of its jobs, is to put glucose in the cell. But it also says, well, if a cell needs glucose because it's so busy, maybe it needs some growth hormone. So it also gives the cell growth hormone. Now, what is cancer but a cell that continues to divide and the mass grows? So here, it's triggering this, it's giving the cancer cells what it needs to grow. And then if you eat these types of foods a lot, you can get chronic inflammation. We'll talk a little more about what that would be. And if you overconsume any food, if you take in more calories than you burn up or use up, it will put weight on you. So if you steadily overconsume these types of carbohydrates in your diet, eventually you'll get insulin resistance. Have you heard that term before? So let me talk a little bit about that. This is my little story about insulin resistance. So let's say your body is sort of this little community, and the insulin is your local realty company, like Century 21. And I don't work for them, so I'm not getting paid to mention their name. And then insulin is a Century 21 real estate agent, because it carries the keys to the cells to let glucose in. And glucose is the customer who's looking for a place to live or to go. So when the pancreas picks up that there's glucose coming in to the blood, it sends out insulin, the realtor, and says, go, let them in the house, and let them do their thing. Well, that's good and fine, but what if you have so much glucose all the time and you don't have enough houses, or the houses say, I'm full, and it tells insulin, sorry, there's no room, you've been giving me plenty of glucose, I don't need any more. And so then you would say the cell is resistant to insulin, so insulin resistance. And then you've got this glucose sitting around either with no place to go, so then it starts causing problems like affecting the inside of your blood vessels, which then can affect people's visions, their circulation to their kidneys, the circulation to their feet. The other thing is, if you have extra glucose around and you have a cancer cell that would like that glucose, it says, hey, insulin, we got room, come on here with your glucose. So the insulin takes the glucose to the cancer cells. Hey, cancer cell, would you like a little growth hormone while we're at it? And there you got it, okay? So that's sort of my explanation of it. So what happens if you have insulin resistance? Well, in terms of cancer, if it's persistently high, high blood glucose, there's an increased risk that you will not survive cancer, so reduced cancer survival. There's a greater chance of cancer coming back, but it is possible to reverse insulin resistance. So that's one of the things that can be done to prevent cancer from coming back. People who have this condition have more post-operative complications, so if people are having breast reconstruction or any kind of surgery, they could be at a higher risk for post-op complications. The immune system can be more suppressed, and if you're already suppressed from being on chemo, other treatments, then that could increase your risk for infection. And it also increases estrogen circulating in the blood, and that could possibly affect estrogen-dependent tumors. So you know, one of the main ways we treat breast cancer, if it depends on estrogen to grow, is to suppress or block the estrogen release. So you don't need extra estrogen circulating around your body. So what's left to eat? Well, that's coming in just a little bite. So let's move on and talk a little bit about inflammation. I'm sure everybody's heard of that. Well, the good Lord gave us a gift with inflammation. And it's something that happens all the time and we don't know it. But there's a normal inflammation and then there's chronic inflammation. So in normal inflammation, if I would cut myself, then my body wants to do a few things. It wants to keep me from bleeding to death. So it's going to send cells there that are going to start making the blood clot. And it's going to send cells that are going to start putting like a net to sort of help the tissue heal. My body doesn't want any foreign things to come in, so it's going to send white blood cells to like the rescue squad, and they're going to start gobbling up like Pac-Man any microorganisms or foreign objects. I mean, if you get a splinter, it does the same thing. That doesn't belong in me, so it'll isolate it. So you get all this blood circulation and you get all these body chemicals of the immune system that are taking care of it. It burns, it itches, it's red, it swells up, right? And then eventually, if you watch it, it all starts to heal up and it pulls itself together and you get a scar, and then over time that scar tends to get less and less and less. So inflammation comes, it does its job, but then it's time to go away when things have healed, right? But chronic inflammation is this kind of on alert, red alert of your body's own EMS system, kind of red alert all the time. And those reactions, if it's constantly pro-inflammatory, can begin to change your cells, among other things. So chronic inflammation is what I'm talking about here. So actually there are different things that lead to it, but the standard American diet is one of the big culprits, and we call that the SAD diet. Also a high-fat diet, especially low-quality omega-6 fats and trans fats. We don't have trans fats anymore. They're not allowed to put it in processed food. So we're lucky in that regard. And then too much saturated fat. It doesn't matter what that news report came out and said. You can have some saturated fat, but don't go crazy, you know. But if you eat a high-fat fast food breakfast like, oh, I love McDonald's Egg McMuffins and hash browns, right? It's really good. But if you eat that kind of breakfast, you'll have inflammatory substances in your blood for about 3 to 4 hours. And then what if your lunch is kind of the same thing? And what if your snack in the afternoon is kind of the same thing? And your dinner at night and your snack before bedtime? That's about 12 hours a day where you have these inflammatory substances going around and causing trouble. So here's my breakfast of champions, because I think it's good to start off with a substantive breakfast. I can eat eggs. I enjoy eating eggs. And I'll take some collard greens or some other greens, saute it with garlic. You don't have to use garlic if you don't like it. And then put a little hole in the middle like you used to do toads in the hole, you know, or whatever they call it. And then you crack your egg in the middle of it. And this egg came from a happy chicken. I know it was happy because I went and met the chicken. But I really did. My neighbor has chickens, and she invites me over to say hello to the girls. But anyway, they eat out in the yard, and they eat bugs and grubs and grass seeds, and she feeds them greens from my garden, so it's kind of payback. So anyway, that chicken, remember we are what they eat? Because of what it eats, it doesn't have the pro-inflammatory type fats in the yolk that a corn-fed chicken would have, or a chicken that eats GMO soy and corn. So I eat that egg. I know it's a lot of detail about my breakfast, but anyway. And it satisfies me for a good while. So what else fans the fires of inflammation? Well, when you have body fat that grows around accumulates around the middle of your abdomen, around your organs, they call that visceral fat. That's angry fat. It's not helping you, and it releases all sorts of pro-inflammatory chemicals in your body, whereas I have to just accept that, you know, postmenopausal, the body is going to accumulate certain fat in certain places, but that's not the same as the angry fat that comes right here. So it's not just putting weight there. Smoking is very, very inflammatory. And periodontal disease, we've known for years that periodontal disease, that's like gum disease, it's associated with higher rate of heart disease. But lately we found out that it's also associated with a higher risk of dying prematurely from cancer. So really important to take care of your gums, take care of your mouth, take care of inflammation anywhere that it might be. So what foods help quench the fires of inflammation? Does this list look similar to the other lists we've had? Same types of things. I do want to mention turmeric, which was on that spice list earlier up as suppressing NF-kappa B. That's that orange spice that's like in a lot of curry, has an ingredient in it called curcumin. It's an active ingredient that's not only anti-inflammatory, but it prevents cancer cells from building a blood supply to itself, and it helps cancer cells do what we call apoptosis, which is a big fancy word for it just commits suicide, which is a good thing. We want the cancer cells to not replicate. There are a lot of oils that are anti-inflammatory, and we've used olive oil quite a bit in your meals tonight. We have chia seeds actually ground up in your crisp topping, that little topping. Wild-caught salmon, so this is salmon that was really going crazy when you caught it, you know, having a big party, or no. That's what somebody saw. I said, is this wild-caught salmon? And I asked at the restaurant, she says, well, I don't know how it was behaving when it was caught. But wild-caught salmon, remember, we are what they eat. They feed on plankton deep in the ocean, and that helps them make a healthy fat in their tissues. If they eat corn, which is what sometimes they're fed if they're farm raised, and can't you see the salmon, you know, down in the ocean eating corn every day? But anyway, so the corn-fed salmon would have a different kind of fat. Soy and breast cancer, I wanted to bring it up. Several years ago, like every oncologist was saying, don't eat soy if you have breast cancer, period. Then there were some studies, some larger studies that said, well, there could be some cases where it's okay to have soy even if you have breast cancer. And the truth is, in those studies, people were eating whole food soy. They were not eating soy protein powder, and they weren't taking soy capsules, and they weren't eating textured vegetable protein like in knot dogs and things like that. But Dr. Cheryl Ortel, in this community, what a gift you have to have her in this community. She knows a lot of the nuances, and there are some women, it's about 5%, who have a problem with their genetics where they're not able to detoxify themselves from the metabolites of estrogen, which could be stimulatory to breast cancer. So if you see Dr. Ortel, or if you have a doctor who wants to find out more, you can be tested for all the estrogens that you have. You have many different types in your body, and they can determine whether or not you might be at risk if you ate soy. So in general, what they say in this community, the recommendation is if you have breast cancer, for the good of all, it's probably better not to eat soy. I have not eaten soy in 5 years, and you can live without it, but you can actually go for more testing to find out whether or not you'd be at risk for eating soy. The microbiome, have you heard that word? It's kind of getting to be a buzzword, at least in the healthcare field. But you've heard of probiotics, right? Okay, so what is that? Well, you know, you're taking microorganisms. Our bodies have more microorganisms living in us than we have cells of our own bodies. So we just happen to be a vehicle for transporting all these microorganisms. And so it's really important to take care of them. And we need to start thinking of our gut, our intestines, not as a gutter, but as a garden. Because that's where a lot of those microorganisms live. And if they're in a healthy balance, I mean, think about it. If you live off of someone, you want them to be healthy, right? Because if they're not, you're not going to be able to keep mooching off of them, right? So you want them to be healthy. So these microorganisms actually do lots of things that help us to be healthy because they want to live too. So they can support the integrity of your gut gastrointestinal wall, which is really important. They can affect, they have all kinds of signaling. And believe it or not, there's a difference in the microorganisms that live in people who are overweight, that live in their gut, than people who are not overweight. So it's possible to get your flora in balance. It might help with losing weight, coming into a healthier weight for you. So when that garden is not thriving, it can have some links to cancer, and here are some of these. And you're going to be, I guarantee you, hearing more and more about the gut and these bacteria that live mostly in the gut, but they can be very helpful to your immune system and all sorts of things. So what the take home for you is to eat foods that either feed the microflora, so like broccoli, here we go with broccoli again, so cruciferous vegetables, beans, So that's what we call prebiotics. Have you heard that term? So you got to feed them, right? And then you want to eat foods that have healthy microorganisms in it, like fermented foods, so like yogurt. And this yogurt that you had tonight was made right here in this area. It's absolutely delicious. And we just set it in cheesecloth like we were going to make cheese, and we thickened it up so it became like a whipped cream. So it has healthy microorganisms. So when you go to buy yogurt, don't get it with sugar in it. Lots of sugar, don't get lots of sugar. And look for it to have live active cultures, especially lactobacillus and bifidus are the two ones to look for, especially. There are other fermented foods. I don't know if you've ever had kombucha. Tempeh and miso are fermented, and you can get chickpea miso or red bean miso, and it doesn't have any soy in it. The Asians eat a lot of fish sauce. If you've ever gone to like a Vietnamese or a Thai restaurant, that's a fermented type of food. Kefir, so kefir, that's fermented. Sauerkraut, naturally fermented, is another fermented food. All right, wine's fermented too, by the way, so enjoy a little bit. So in other words, it does matter what you eat. And I just want to say, after working in oncology for 20 years, I really got sick of what I heard is physicians and nurses and dietitians leaving the patient with the impression that it didn't matter what they ate. And I still have patients tell me that, and I'm not really sure if healthcare professionals are still saying that, but maybe they don't sometimes understand enough about the power of nutrition, or maybe what they're saying is, you know, I'm concerned about you losing weight, so I don't want you to, you know, not eat anything, so eat what you can. But it is important. But is there a problem with what we eat and the way we eat? Well, I have my standard American theory, standard American lifestyle, which is SAS, standard American stress, plus SAI, standard American inactivity, plus the SAD, standard American diet, leads to SAS to the second subscript, which is standard American sickness, or SAS, which is physically evident in the SAG, which is a standard American gut. Now, the way we remedy the SAS and the SAG is to use SAM, which is standard American medicine, which might say, well, let's cut it out, or let's give you some pills, because God forbid you're not going to want to eat some delicious, healthy food and change your life. Or let's just say there's only one good food and everything else is bad, so all we want you to do is eat steaks and bacon and eggs and cheese and, you know, fat and protein. So then what happens is you get SASSY, which is standard American side effects. So if you want to like go beyond the standard American way, it is possible that food can be a delicious medicine. It won't be hard to take and it won't taste bad. I mean, I hope you didn't think tonight the food was, you know, scary or, you know, but I remember there's this guy who's a fighter pilot in World War II, and he was at one of the retreats. And I came out with a whole grain pancake for breakfast, and I was putting it down in front of him, and I thought the guy was going to run the other way. And I said, my gosh, you are a fighter pilot, you know, World War II, you had a good record, you know, brave and all that, and you're going to run away from a whole grain pancake. So anyway, I guess it can be scary. But for something to be nourishing, it means it has to taste good. And you have to be able to weave it into your budget and your life. And this is a great place to come to figure out how to do that. And I was told that there was a person who, part of the garden, who had to take insulin for blood sugar problems, and now because of eating the way she eats in the garden, she doesn't have to take insulin anymore. And this is what, one season? One season? I mean, starting in the spring maybe? So it doesn't take that long, and you can do it, and it can taste good at the same time. So if you've decided to change the course, let's look at some principles of what might help you in selecting your food. And these are principles I use in planning menus, and going to my refrigerator and trying to figure out what to eat, or going out to eat. And I'll go through each of these. Whole, fresh, natural, seasonal, local, in harmony with tradition, balanced, and delicious. So by whole food means eating the whole food with all its edible parts, the whole food that nature provides it. So for instance, eating whole grain quinoa. It doesn't mean if you enjoy eating chicken that you sit there and eat the whole thing by yourself. All right, ooh, yuck. Okay, sorry vegetarians. But if you do enjoy eating, say, chicken, if you cook it with the bone in it, what's going to happen? How's it going to taste? Better, moister, right? And what's going to cook into the meat? So the calcium and the minerals in the bone, right? So, and then you can take all those leftover bones, instead of making ugly pictures for people to look at after a meal, you could put it in a stock. You know, and bone broths can be very, very nourishing, especially to people who have been very ill and can't eat a lot of food. So bone broths can be very nourishing, and they really make a soup taste great. So here's a whole grain, and we're going to have a little anatomy class. So the bran layer is, you know, oat bran. So that's this outer layer. Then there's this germ layer, and that's the layer that is the first four letters of what word? Germinate, right? Okay. So this is the part of the plant that if you soaked it and treated it right, because it's still a whole plant, a whole grain, it will sprout. And it can grow into a plant. So it's still very, very much has the potential to grow into a plant. And then the middle part is called the endosperm. And so where are the nutrients? Well, most of the nutrients are in the bran layer and the germ layer. And believe it or not, folks, these are the layers we take out when we refine a grain. And also in making bread, they don't like a lot of bran in the bread because it cuts through the gluten fibers and you don't get that nice airy bread. So that's what they take out, and they're taking out most of the nutrients, and what they're leaving us with is the endosperm, that starchy part that has lots of energy. You can go on that for a good while, but you don't have enough fiber and there's not enough nutrients. And this is what we lose when we take those parts of the grain away. Anywhere from like 16% to 90-something% of these minerals and other nutrients. So then what do? They add it back in, right? But we have to pay more money for the thing that had it in it naturally rather than the one that they had to add it back in. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. But the take home of this is all the parts of the grain are, if you think of any whole food, it acts synergistically, so it acts together, it behaves, it's like a nice family that's getting along. So it acts synergistically in the life of the plant, and when you eat that, you are eating that harmony, that synergism, and your body knows more what to do with the whole food than it does when you present it with like textured vegetable protein, which is like a soybean taken down to I don't know what. They have to use all these chemicals to get it to be that way. Some examples of whole grains. You had quinoa tonight, millet, not just for birds, brown rice, and there's also black rice. Have you ever eaten forbidden rice? It has more of the good stuff in it than the anthocyanins and even blueberries. Oats, lightly pearled barley, and I wanted to bring up sprouted grain bread. So those of you who ate some of the spread with the sprouted grain bread, it was Ezekiel bread. I wanted to mention that. So there's lots of different sprouted grain breads, and there are actually some companies locally who make their own, but Genesis and Ezekiel bread are these kind of national brands. What they've done is they've taken all these ingredients you see here, whole wheat, barley, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, lentils, all these grains and legumes and seeds, and they have what we call sprouted them. So they have soaked them. And we soaked actually your quinoa So we actually sprouted your quinoa even though it didn't turn into a plant in 2 days. But when you sprout them like that, you activate the plant to be the healthiest, most nutritious it is in its whole life. And the other thing is they don't grind any of these up into a flour. So that would mean it has a lower glycemic load, right? So this bread, it's brown, so people are going to be suspicious. That's not white bread. I don't know if I can eat that. But I think it tastes pretty good. And you're getting a complete protein, whereas if you ate just even a piece of whole wheat bread by itself, you would not be getting all the essential amino acids. But in this bread, you would be, and you slap a little almond butter or peanut butter on it, and you've got, a pretty substantial food there. Also, and here's something I paid $10,000 to learn. Again, I'm giving it to you for free. If you add vinegar or other acid to a carbohydrate-containing food, that will decrease the glycemic index. So I soak my grains, whole grains, with a little apple cider vinegar, or you could use yogurt, you could use lemon juice, and soak it overnight, and that will make it lower the glycemic index. It will also make it more digestible. So a lot of cultures traditionally ferment or sprout their grains, and that makes them more digestible, and you're going to absorb more calcium, by the way. So foods that lower glycemic load or inflammation, same list we've been seeing all along. An apple a day is a little anti-cancer factory. So get your apples organic, because they're highly sprayed, by the way. But if you eat the apple with the peeling on, you've got this little anti-cancer factory. Also lowers triglycerides while you're at it. This is put in food. It has the name of a food. Does anybody know what this is? This is called natural strawberry flavor. Meaning it's meant to taste like the natural food for which it is named. So if you eat strawberry jello, strawberry popsicles, strawberry pie that doesn't have a single strawberry in it but tastes like strawberries, this is the food. Well, it's not a food, but these are the chemicals that are giving it that taste. Eating food fresh when possible. Also, if you dehydrate a food, so a sun-dried tomato is an example of that, or raisin, now that you can get some of your vegetables dehydrated. Or if you naturally pickle a food like sauerkraut, those all maintain their nutrients, and if you have a fermented food like sauerkraut, it's going to make even more nutrients for you. It's going to make more B vitamins. However, canned and frozen foods now, the dietitians are telling me that nowadays those have a fairly decent amount of nutrition in them compared to the way they used to make canned foods and frozen foods. Eating foods natural, or so raised or grown as naturally as possible without pesticides or chemicals or hormones, and also eating it as close to the way as it looked when it was picked or came out of the ground. Like eating an orange, it's natural. Orange Jell-O doesn't cut it, all right? Is organic really better? Well, certainly, if you want to cut down on the chemicals that come in your body, that is a good reason to eat organic when that is a food that's highly sprayed. So we'll talk about foods that may not be sprayed so often. But let's look at these two chicken livers. This is a glistening, supple, healthy chicken liver. And this one's kind of yellow and knotted up and gnarly and hard. This liver, the package said this was an organically fed chicken and it was pastured. It was out in the pasture. This one said all natural, no hormones, no antibiotics, vegetarian fed. Well, sorry, chickens aren't vegetarian anyway, so that doesn't impress me. Now, if it ate organic vegetarian feed, that would be okay. So what this tells me is this chicken's liver, the liver is where you detoxify a lot of things in your body. This chicken's liver had to work really hard just to detoxify that chicken, probably from its diet. because it didn't live long enough to get exposed to much of anything except through its diet. So when I think about those livers, I think, okay, I'll pay a little bit extra for that chicken, and maybe I'll cook it in a way that it can be spread out over a few meals. But when should you get organic food? Let's say you have limited dollar, a limited budget, or you're somewhere where they just don't carry a lot of organic food. Well, not everything is highly sprayed or sprayed at all, and it depends one year to the next. Because one year maybe the blueberries have to be sprayed, and oranges in Florida now are starting to be attacked by, I think, a virus or something. So, you know, they've never had to spray oranges in Florida, and they may have to now. So it changes year by year. So this is the environmental working groups, Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. If you have a smartphone and are smart enough to figure it out, or have a grandkid who can figure it out, go to the App Store and look for the Dirty Dozen, and you can download the most current app. And I take it to or you can go on the website and download it and print it and make a little card and put it in your wallet. So if I am buying apples and asparagus and sweet potatoes on my list, I'm going to get those apples organic. But I'm not going to get the asparagus organic or the sweet potatoes, because there's little chance that those have been sprayed. So you see how, and there's a big difference in the price of organic asparagus and conventional. So do you see how you can use this to maybe help you make some decisions? And so some days I just may not eat certain vegetables or buy certain vegetables because I can't get it organic, and I probably would be better off doing that. If it's processed, you got to learn to read the label, so I want you to help me out now, because I can see, you know, I need to wake you up a little bit. So help me out. I'm going to do a little rap song. Come on. Now I'm going to tell you what's the deal. You don't need no label when the food is real, but with the processed stuff, you got to be able to take a minute and read the label. Read the label. Read the label. Read. Refined sugar, additives, and wicked trans fats are things I wouldn't even feed my cats, but they sneak them in as an AKA and tempt you to eat them every day. Read the label. Read the label. Read the label. Read the label. So, Chef Laura, how we gonna know if the food is real or the food is faux? I'll teach you the words over and over until you got the number on all the cheap fills. Don't seek your thrills. On cheap fills, don't seek your thrills. On cheap fills. Here's names for sugar, and I must insist that they're no good if they're high on the list. Mannitol, sorbitol, fructose and galactose, maltose, dextrose, sucrose and lactose. Read the label. Read the label. Read the label. Read the label. Some additives are additives. You can't fool me, like nitrites and benzoates and MSG. Artificial flavors and red dye number 2 and too much standard chloride does a number on you. So read the label. Read the label. Read the label. Read the label. The list goes on. I could rap all day about all the cheap fills that get in the way. I hope you see that now you're able to pick real food to put on the table. So tonight at dinner, play a game where you read the label and pronounce the names. Then tell your family why you no longer will seek your thrills. On cheap fills, won't seek our thrills. On cheap fills, won't seek our thrills. On cheap fills, won't seek our thrills. On cheap fills, yo. All right. So, if it's processed, read the label. So, peanut butter should have what? Peanuts. Does it? No. Look at that. All those ingredients. Corn syrup, solids, sugar. This peanut butter, organic, peanuts. Yes. Strawberries is a good thing to eat or give to your boss if you're expecting sort of a dressing down. You know, they can't say anything mean for 15 minutes after they eat it. Eating food locally grown, and how local can it get than what it's been tonight? Thank you to Heather for going all over the place and finding locally grown produce and with locally made yogurts and things grown in the garden, so you have really eaten about as local as it gets. Here's some gems right here in your community. And by the way, here's how it used to be, right outside. Here's how it is now. Wow, isn't that something? Yeah. So, and some farmers markets take stamps, food stamps and WIC and senior citizen discounts, so and you can usually look that up on a website. Eating foods in season helps you adapt to your environment. So we had, obviously if we ate food from out of the garden, we were eating food that's in season. But if you spend all winter eating raw, summer-type vegetables, you're going to be cold and cranky, your joints might ache. If you eat what's raised in the winter or stores over the winter, like winter squash, we had actually butternut squash in the chili tonight. You could have put sweet potatoes in it. So eating foods that take care of themselves in the winter, take care of you in the winter, actually, is what I meant to say. And eating in harmony with tradition. If you want to eat more plants like grains and beans and you don't know where to start, you can have a very interesting conversation with someone who remembers the way they ate in the old country. So unless you're Native American, all of us have roots across the waters somewhere. So find out what were the grains and the beans eaten by people of your ancestors, and those will probably taste good to you, and you might digest them easier. And also think about food traditions of your faith and your culture. With Smith Center, we have patient navigators who work in some of the African American and African immigrant communities. And our African American client said, we want to do a cookbook of healthy soul food. And so we came up with this cookbook, and people gave us their recipes. We tweaked them a little bit to make them healthier, but I didn't have to do a thing to that chili. Although I will admit I added a secret ingredient to it, which the Mexicans do. And I put chocolate in it because we know chocolate's, dark chocolate is supposedly good for us. So anyway, Soul Savory. And you all could do your own healthy cookbook right out of, from this group here. And eating in balance, a dynamic process. What you might need to balance you today might not be what you need next week or at a different time in your life, and you have to be willing to think about that. If you're on chemo and your mouth is sore or you have side effects like gastrointestinal upset and diarrhea, you may not be able to eat a lot of high fiber food for a time, so you just eat the healthiest you can to keep you as healthy as you can be. And a healthy balance means you have a good balance of nutrients in the food you eat. Eat a rainbow a day of dark colored fruits and vegetables, and pistachio ice cream does not count as your green, but that's where the phytonutrients are. Balance it for textures, so you wouldn't want everything all mushy. So you want some things kind of crunchy, some things creamy, some things chewy. You want different kinds of taste. Use different kind of cooking methods. So if you boiled everything all the time, that would be pretty boring. And then balance for quantity. If you put your two palms together like this, that would be how much food your stomach could hold, and leave a third of it with air so you can digest the food or cook the food. Okay? So imagine if you chewed your food really well, you could eat more food, right? I think about that because I like to eat. So, but if you don't chew well, then you're going to fill up even faster. Your stomach's going to be just full. And what if you drink a lot of cold liquids when you eat? You're going to douse your digestive fire, and if you overfill a pot, what happens? It boils over, and some of the food cooks and some doesn't cook, right? And if your stomach boils over, where does it go? In your esophagus, and you get what? Reflux, right? So don't overeat. Chew well so you can get more food in. and think about quantity. And the new American plate, so not these big plates like the fancy restaurants have, but a normal dinner plate, if you eat animal foods, a third of your plate max is the animal protein. And then the other 2/3 is from plants. And really half of that, most of that should be vegetables, and then you can have your grain. Now if you don't eat any animal protein at all or no fish, you could have a totally balanced vegetarian plate, but instead of like the piece of chicken or fish, you would have something that's higher in protein, like a bean and a grain combination, something like that. But mostly vegetables on that plate. And a balanced view. We love to hear good news about our bad habits, right? So be aware of overdoing it when you hear good news about how good a food is for you, like dark chocolate's good for me. I can eat a whole chocolate bar every day. And also, there's no one particular food that's a demon or a panacea. So I get very suspicious if somebody says, just eat high fat or just eat lots of protein and don't eat this or that. So there's no good or bad foods, remember, it just gives information. And everything in moderation, including moderation. And then the last principle, it has to taste great. So to build flavor, you have to think FASS. F-A-S-S. The right amount of fat, the right amount of acid, the right amount of salt, and the right amount of sweet. Okay? You also need to have quality ingredients, so it doesn't help to start off with food that's not a good quality. And also there's one other taste that they have recently described called umami, and that's a Japanese term, and that means that taste that's kind of a savory deliciousness. And so you don't really get it too much from sweet foods, but you do get it from more savory foods. And the way you can build umami in something is to add things like, well, actually it's kind of a meaty taste, so actually meat has a lot of this what's called glutamate in it. But you also can get it from adding a little wine, a little soy sauce, a little fish sauce, a little miso, tomatoes, mushrooms. So there's lots of ways you can add that extra deliciousness. And so in our chili, we added a lot of umami by putting all those tomatoes in there. So that really gave it a very satisfying, and it didn't have any meat in it, right? So it was very satisfying. But the main flavor builders are the right amount of fat, acid, salt, and sweet, and then adding something savory, if that savory dish. So what the fat does is fat carries the flavor. Have you ever heard that? We were taught that in culinary school. So what that means is your tongue has all these taste buds, and if you have fat coating your tongue, it carries the flavors of the food across all those taste buds, like a little oil slick. Okay? The other thing fat does physiologically in your body for your health is it helps you feel full, so it gives you a sense of satiety. I feel satisfied. And also, as we said, fat slows down the movement of some of the other foods, the high carbohydrate foods, and it lowers the glycemic load of your food. So that's fat. And we're going to use, in the quinoa salad, we're going to use extra virgin olive oil. But other fats, like fats we had in your dessert, we used walnuts. You could use avocados. And by the way, if you eat fat in a meal, you're going to get like with a salad. So maybe some avocado slices or extra virgin olive oil in your salad dressing. You'll absorb way more phytonutrients than if you had a fat-free dressing. So isn't that nice that the fat is back? Okay. So lots of ways you can put fat as a flavor builder. And it's not like you use a lot. Now acid. What acid does is it sort of bursts open the cells, so it sort of breaks them open, which is why we use it to marinate things, right? It makes it more tender. But when you burst open the cells, you're going to release more flavor from the cells. That's where it is. And the other thing that acid does is particularly like lemon juice or citric acid. Believe it or not, eating citric acid will actually make your blood more alkaline. So a lot of us are walking around with blood that's more acidic than is healthy for a lot of your body processes. So you hear about people talking about alkalizing your blood. Well, actually eating lots of vegetables and eating citric acid can help alkalize your blood. So acid bursts open the cells and releases the flavors. And also remember, we said if you eat acid with a meal, it lowers the glycemic index. So in our quinoa salad, we're going to use balsamic vinegar, and we're going to use lemon. And Mary, where's Mary? Could you do me a favor and get the open balsamic vinegar that's back there, so I don't have to open this beautiful bottle? Okay, so lemon juice would work for an acid. Tomato is kind of acid and sweet. When you roast a tomato, it gets a little sweeter, but you can get some acid from that. But this is what we're going to use for the acid. The right amount of salt. And boy, I've seen cardiologists about have a heart attack when I start adding salt to food, but no pun intended. But I'm talking the right amount of salt. And if you cook with whole, unprocessed foods that don't have salt in it to start, you're not going to use near as much salt as they go ahead and automatically put in processed food. So I use sea salt because regular table salt has dextrose in it, which is a sugar derived from corn. And I have a theory that if you have sugar in your salt and it keeps it from caking, you might end up needing more salt to get the salty taste. So sea salt. And salt is the true seasoning ingredient. It means it enhances the flavor of whatever it's with. So have you ever seen people eat a sweet food like a melon and put salt on it? Or Italians like to take salty prosciutto ham and have it with like cantaloupe. So that saltiness, it doesn't make it less sweet, does it? It makes it sweeter. So it brings out the flavor of whatever it's in. So even in like a dessert, before I'll add more sugar, I might add a pinch of salt, and that might actually enhance the natural sweetness of what's in there. So, so that's salt. And also people need minerals. And one thing that happens to people on chemo is they start losing minerals. So some of their minerals like magnesium goes down, potassium. So salts provide you with minerals. Okay, the right amount of sweet. So what does sweet do? Well, you have a part of your brain. Thank you so much. Hey, we were going to call him out later, but yeah, Joe. Yeah.
I'm just a little sexy assistant.
Yes, he is. He cooks for sometimes 450 people a day or 450 meals in a day.
Yeah, so usually on Mondays and then over 500 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But that's what we're here for, to take care of the seniors, so it's all good.
Yeah, thank you. So you have a part of your brain, thank you, Mary, the pleasure center of your brain. And when you eat something sweet, it sends a message right to that pleasure center and says, oh, I like this and I'd like more. So there's kind of this survival thing for us and for the food. The apples likes that we like sweet, because then we'll eat more and the birds will eat more, and then they'll drop the seeds places, you know, and plant more trees. But anyway, that sweet flavor keeps you interested in the food and kind of keeps you interested in it through several bites of the meal. And then, of course, we need sweetness for energy, you know, so we have to have it. Even though I've sort of slammed high glycemic load foods, we still need glucose for energy. So sweetness adds that kind of, you know, oh boy, that tastes really good to the food. And depending on the dish, some things need to taste sweeter than others, so you don't need a lot of sweetener necessarily. So in our quinoa salad, a grain is considered basically on the sweet side. Actually, you know, it breaks down, the starches break down into glucose. But we also have some green peas in it. Now I have onion and garlic sitting out here in front of the sweet Why would I have that? What happens when you cook an onion for a while and it starts getting browner and browner? What do they call that? Caramelizing. Caramelizing. Caramel. So you're releasing the natural sugars in that. And when we roasted the garlic for the spread, the lima bean spread, it brought out the sweetness in that garlic. And it'll also drive the vampires away too, by the way. So anyway, so that's sweet. And then the grains are part of it. Some other quality ingredients we used, we cooked the grain in broth. So it's a seasoned liquid. It will add more flavor than if you just used water. We have some great herbs in there. We have dill, which is kind of a naturally salty herb that if you can't eat a lot of salt, that's a good herb to use to add a sense of saltiness. We have parsley in the salad. You could use any kind of vegetables just about you want in this salad. You have the recipe, but we use broccoli, we used asparagus, red peppers grown here, we used red onions, and I boiled those a little bit and shocked them, that is, put them in cold water. So that brought out the sweetness, because you know if you eat raw red onions, sometime the rest of the day you taste it. So if we cook it like that a little bit, it doesn't linger. And then we have olives in it, which is going to add a little bit of saltiness. So, all right, Laura, get on with it. So let me have a couple of volunteers, and I'd like 2 to come because everybody's sense of what is delicious varies. And I want you to help me build the flavor in this dish. So who would like to come up and volunteer? I'm very nice. Everybody survived this demonstration in the past. So who would like to come on up and help me? Come on. Come on, we'll be here forever, and then we'll never get to the garden to sing if somebody doesn't come up. And I have to use this induction burner here because Leanne bought it for me. And actually, I have been using it back in the kitchen. It's a very energy-saving type of burner. It doesn't actually heat, so I can put my hand on here, but when you put a certain type of metal on it, it interacts with the molecules, and it heats really faster and cools down faster than gas. And if I take this pan off of it after it's been hot, I can pretty soon put my hand back on. And so it doesn't heat up the house as much. So, so who's coming up here? I don't see anybody. Yay! Praise the Lord. So while you're coming up here, I'm going to heat a little olive oil. And can you come on this side? And olive oil has a low smoke point, so it's not really good for high heat. But I'm going to just use it for a little sautéing. So I don't want you to have to eat raw garlic before bedtime. Okay. Okay. So woo, and I can smell it. So I'm going to sauté it a little bit in this pan, and that'll make the room smell good. And you know, half of what you taste is because of smell. Have you ever had a cold and then you could hardly taste the meal? So being able to smell, but for some people on chemo, smelling the food is really nauseating, so you have to think about that. I just see one person. I'm not seeing double. Come on. One other person. Come on up. Tell me your name again. Bridget. Bridget, and you are? Cinderella. You did. Yes. It's good to see you are on the fitness machine. Okay, so these are your tasting spoons. Hold on to this. Okay. So, and this is the mother spoon. So Cinderella and Bridget. This is just cooked quinoa. It might have had a little, I don't know if he cooked it in broth or not. But I just want you to taste it by itself. I'm going to put this on your spoon. And on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is not delicious and 10 is delicious, delicious, just rate it where we are just starting off.
8.
Oh, really? Is that good? Wow, we don't have much place to go then. All right. Y'all might as well sit down. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I believe I'm going to add a little bit of oil. Okay? And usually I would mix the whole dressing up at once, but we're going to add, actually I'm going to add the vegetables. I changed my mind. So I'm going to add some vegetables and see what you think about having all these vegetables that aren't seasoned. So I'm going to put a little broccoli in there. I'm going to put some of the asparagus. And I have been to the Eastern Shore in the spring to know that you all have wonderful asparagus, right? And isn't it nice that it doesn't have to be sprayed? So that's something that's pretty much usually organic. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. And we're going to put some red pepper, which is a little bit on the... Am I putting anything in here that you can't eat? No. Okay. That's good. So we'll put a little red pepper in it.
Your pants.
You just noticed my pants, the chili peppers? Yeah. And then I'm going to put some onion in it. So lots of vegetables. Can you see that this, even though it's got grain in it, it also has a lot of vegetables in it. And then I'm going to put the sweet peas. And I'm going to hold off on the olives because they would be what? Salty, right? Yeah. So we're just going to put the plain vegetables in it. And you may or may not think this does anything for it. But let's just get a taste of what vegetable do you like? Do you like broccoli?
I like them all.
You like them all.
They're good.
Your mother would be so proud of you. All right. So just taste it now. Unsalted vegetables. We'll add the herbs in just a little bit. Change anything?
You just taste broccoli.
It just tastes broccoli. Okay. Not very balanced, right? Is this thing heating up? Come on over here.
It goes off every time you lift your pan. You have to reset it. I have one at home.
Oh, you do? Well, it says it's, yeah.
All you have to do is lift the pan off and it goes off.
Oh, okay. So I should start it all over again?
Yes,
Okay. Oh, you know what? I didn't press the start button. Okay. Duh. Don't try this at home. Okay. I'm going to put a little olive oil. Now, one thing I didn't mention is that oil or fat changes the way a food feels in your mouth. So mouth feel is very important. That's why kids are like so picky about textures and things like that. And that's why I used to hate lima beans and why I made up that recipe. So let's just see how this might have changed it, if at all. And it's not balanced yet, so I don't know if it's made it better or worse. Did it change anything?
It's not as sweet.
It's not as sweet. Okay. Oh boy, can you smell that? Woo-wee. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is add acid. Doesn't that smell wonderful? Can y'all smell it? Okay, start it again. So what I'm going to do now then is add some acid to this. And I love things sour. Some people don't. I have a neighbor who will not eat a salad if it's dressed with something really sour. But this is likely to change your opinion of the way it tastes. So we'll put a little bit of lemon juice here and mix it in. And the best way to season this is to give it some time, T-I-M-E. And then, so you may taste the lemon juice pretty strongly now, but over time it'll get absorbed in. So let's give you a little sweet there. And just let me know if it changed the flavor very much. Did it change it? Is it better with the lemon juice? I agree. Yeah. And could you hand me that balsamic vinegar? I don't want to jump over the cord here. You remember the limbo? So how about a little balsamic? Yeah, okay. We'll put a little balsamic vinegar on there. So that's made from grapes, right? And it's aged. So,
Oh, that's true.
and so balsamic vinegar actually adds a little bit of that taste, umami, because it's kind of close to like wine. Yeah. So, are you going to be full again? All right. So, let me know if that did anything. Oh man, the sounds are getting good here. All right, let's put a little garlic. And, ooh, you like garlic?
Yes.
Good. I tell you, though, as an oncology nurse, my patients didn't like it when I ate roasted garlic on toast the night before and went to work and somebody's portacath was clogged up and I had to spend about 2 hours at his head and he was half asleep, but his wife came in and said, "Who has been to Garlic Town?" So watch it. It's meant to be enjoyed with others. Okay. So now I'm going to add some salt. And y'all think I'm adding a lot. Okay, okay. I'm going to put it in a spoon. That wasn't that much. No. Okay. But people always get suspicious. So this is a 1/4 teaspoon. And I'm going to put maybe a half of that. And this is enough salad here for about 6 people, okay? So that's not much salt. And it may not be enough, but let's see if that changed anything. Okay. I think salt is one of the best things in the world to have.
Flavor.
Where are we?
It's very good.
It's very good. Is it delicious? Oh, we forgot. The olives. All right, so if it didn't have, so I don't want to add too much salt if we're going to have olives, right? Okay.
Now, was olives in the salad today or
Yep.
tonight?
Mhm.
It was.
Yep.
I remember it in there.
What kind of olives?
These are Kalamatas. Yeah, Kalamata olives. So these are black olives. You could use green. So let me get a little taste of olive. Here's an olive. Since you got cheated out of your olives earlier.
Oh, you're right.
All right. Are we at delicious?
You are.
You hit the spot.
All right. Thank you very much.